Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you may happen to be and whatever time it is, depending on whether you're watching live or archived. Welcome to another in the Nautel Transmission Talk Tuesday webinar series. I don't know how many times we're getting it right or wrong. Somebody commended me for keeping score, but I think we're past that at this point. This, if I recall correctly, is number 10 in this series, and we've been having a good time. Today, we're going to talk about something a little different. Usually the last one in the month, I try to get a little lighthearted, a little less engineering and a little more fun and a little bit of both. But we've got some good friends with us today. I've got Shane Tobin, Senior Broadcast Engineer with K-Love Air One. Shane, welcome. Thanks for coming to join us today.
Good to be here, Jeff. Thanks for inviting me.
Gee, you're looking all fancy there, studio and everything. You came into the office specifically for this and left Andrea home to deal with an air conditioning failure, I hear.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, thankfully it's working this morning. Just need to thaw out the coils.
Good deal, good deal. We've also got the road warrior extraordinaire, our Western Regional Sales Manager, Jeff Wilson. So, Jeff, welcome and thanks for suckering in to join us today.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good to be here and looking forward to it here, guys.
So Marco Arita asked if I had a Post-it note on my monitor to remind me of the name, and I do have the cover slide in front of me, but to be honest, I keep forgetting to look at it, so I'm not sure it would really do me any good to have a Post-it note either, Marco, but thanks. Marco's been here for almost all of these, and thank you for coming along too. So we're going to have a little fun today. We're going to talk about life on the road, and it's not just those of us like Jeff and I mean, we historically in pre-2020 days spend 50% or more of our time on the road. And there are a lot of things you've got to deal with, but even local engineers, Shane, when you were covering engineering in Wyoming, there are a lot of times you were on the road and in hotels too, yeah?
Oh my goodness, yes. I mean, I spent 15 years in Wyoming, and a good chunk of that was in fact on the road. So I lost track of how many miles I've put on in terms of windshield time. It adds up in a hurry.
Sure does. And before I progress any further, I want to offer a special thanks to our disembodied voice, Ed Sylvester. Ed's the marketing guy that makes all this stuff happen, sets up the invites, coordinates the slide decks. He's the one that herds the cats and makes sure I actually show up on time, which on its own, my wife will tell you is a big enough challenge. So big shout out to Ed, who is sitting in the background and doing all the hard work and heavy lifting.
Thank you very much, Jeff.
Oh, there, see, disembodied voice opened his mic. Awesome. Thanks, Ed. So the usual housekeeping stuff. If you're new to these, there is a question section. You can type in your questions and I'll address them as I see them. I absolutely try to get to everything. If we don't, we'll certainly answer it after the fact in an email. John Coulter mentions that Shane needs to smile more, but I think he was looking at the picture that Ed grabbed for your title page, the Mr. Serious Business one. We've got some pictures of Shane coming. So other thing, if you're an SBE member, the Nautel webinars do qualify for half of a SBE certification research credit under category I. See our president, Wayne Pacina, is with us. Wayne's been watching a lot of these too, and we'll be welcoming him in a future webinar. So looking forward to that as well. All right, now moving forward. Same agenda as always. We'll talk amongst ourselves. We're going to open up your microphones, raise your hand on the control panel. You've got a little hand wavy icon, click it. I do keep an eye out for those. So we're certainly happy to open your mic up and bring you in, or do a typed question, whatever happens to float your boat, as they say in this part of the world. We're going to talk about a bunch of things. We'll talk about airplanes, airports, rental cars, site visits, self-care. This is a big one that Shane and I were discussing earlier. It's really easy to overlook when you get on the road. You can go 18 plus hours a day and totally forget about looking after yourself as well. So we're going to talk a little bit about everything. We're really going to rely on you folks in the audience, because we're going to talk about the good places to eat in your neck of the woods, what you use for apps for this, that, and the other thing, and just all kinds of stuff. So Jeff, you do a lot of flying, and one of the things that people always tell you is, wow, you get to travel to all these places, and it must be so glamorous. And
Yeah, yeah,
go
that
ahead.
is true. That is true. So as I was looking at my stats in 2019, I did 28 trips and I was away from home for 125 days. Total of like 55,000 miles in 59 different cities. And the thing that's amazing here in 2020, thanks to COVID, I've had 6 trips and not near as many nights away from home. And I think my wife and the kids are probably looking forward to the time that when I can start traveling again. So
I've my wife, we've been doing some gardening and a whole bunch of other stuff around the house, but I've already heard I love having you here, but it'd be nice when you're gone for a little bit.
I will
So,
say that the landscaping looks the best it has in a decade.
all right, so moving on. So the first thing, of course, we get going, and you run into these on occasion. You don't always get to pick the airline. So, Jeff, this was one of your pictures, or two of your
It,
pictures.
it is. So I'm located in Quincy, Illinois, and the fastest way to get to the airport in St. Louis, which is the closest large airport, is with Cape Air. And from Quincy to St. Louis, it's 33 minutes, wheels up, wheels down on a Cessna 402. There are 8 of us in there, including the pilot. And most often, I will take the seat right behind the pilot here that you see, mainly A, for the view, and B, unless he's a really big guy, you get a little bit more leg room with the pilot there. So, but they do ask you when you check in, how much do you weigh? And they want to know how much you weigh so they know how much gas to put in. And
Oh
they don't
man,
like it.
fill it
They do,
up. Just
yeah, they
fill
do
it
not
up.
like it when I tell them to fill it up. I'd hate for the lady behind me to lie about her weight.
There was wasn't there a comedy series you were telling me about? If anybody wants to hit it up on YouTube, that
I,
used that line.
if you would like to see one of my favorite comedy bits on travel and flying, especially, is James Gregory and his fear of flying. It will have you in tears. It is that good.
And looking through the attendance list, I see we have got a whole bunch of people here that I know travel quite a bit. I see Kirk Harnack with Telos is on too. So Kirk, we may call on you for some of your travel stories because you probably got as many miles as any of the rest of us. Uh, so once you get to the airport, uh, Shane, what's your best tip for speeding the process? Because you're usually doing this with tools and test gear and suitcases. So what tips do you have for actually getting the stuff to the airport and getting it to where it needs to be?
Oh boy. Well, that's a great subject actually. If I can, I try to travel with just carry-on. Of course, that's a little bit tougher if you're, if you've got tools and things with you. If it's practical, ship your tools ahead to the site and then just, carry on basic stuff with you. Usually, what I've been doing lately is I carry a spectrum analyzer with me, a lot of little Keysight Field Fox. I'll carry that on as one of my carry-on items. I'll carry on my laptop bag as the other carry-on item, and then everything else gets either checked or shipped ahead. So that's tip number one. Although a couple of trips recently, I actually have checked a couple of very large tool bins. When I was driving around quite a bit, I finally got my truck pack down to 2 very large rolling tool bins. Those tool bins went with me to American Samoa and down to Puerto Rico. But that can be a little bit of a challenge to get around an airport, especially if you're dealing with rentals and things like that. So for that, I guess the best tip is, get there early. Make sure you can actually get those checked in. A lot of times the sky caps at the curb will help you as well. So biggest tip I can have there is don't try to do it yourself. Get some help, especially when you've got really heavy stuff to check. Along those lines, one other thing that's kind of handy to know, when you're checking these kind of large things at airports, they do have a media equipment rate. So save yourself, save the station some money, and tell them that you're with the media. Hopefully you've got some kind of station ID or something, and you can check that stuff as media equipment. So.
That's
And,
a really good point there right off the bat. Go ahead,
and
Jeff.
then,
Sorry.
and well, I just want to jump in back at the start. You said you don't check anything, you carry on everything, and that's what I do. And I think most road warriors will probably in their own hands. So have your luggage with you. You don't have to get off of one plane and onto another. And then the other thing I was going to mention really quick, if you travel more than a couple times a year domestically in the United States anyway, 85 bucks pre-check. It is worth its weight in gold.
I was just going to mention exactly that. Pre-check, pre-check, pre-check. I mean, it's not always the magic golden ticket, so to speak, but it really can save a lot of time.
See, I'm the oddball exception to this one. I almost always check my bag, but having said that, I also rely on status. So I pick the same airline repeatedly, maintain status with it. That usually gets you perks like if the seat's not totally full, you get your favorite seatmate. And this is a picture of my favorite seatmate right there. It also guarantees in some areas better attention to making sure your luggage actually gets to the other end. So that's my preference. As I get older and fatter and lazier, I do tend to check the bag a whole lot more than I used to. But having said that, I also keep a spare change of clothes in my laptop bag because there are those times. So, oh, by the way, in the chat window, if everybody's got access to it, Ed has posted the link to that James Gregory bit on air travel. Kirk Harnack graciously sent us the link, and
Thank you,
it's
Kurt.
absolutely, that thing's priceless on its own. So that right off the bat is mine. Airline status, and not just airlines, but hotels, rental cars, everything like that. If you pick one and stick with it, sometimes you'll pay a little more, sometimes you get a better deal, but you'll almost always get some level of preferential treatment that can be useful. And that brings me to rental cars. There's nothing worse than booking a car, showing up at the airport, and they're saying, oh, we don't have any vehicles. And it's like, well, what was the point of the reservation? And I'm sure everybody's had this discussion more than once. You know, I see Jeff nodding, I saw Shane nodding.
Well, just really quick, I've actually had that happen, but it turns out that I made the reservation for the wrong city. So it really was not the car rental's fault. It was my fault, but I digress.
Been there, done that. Yeah, wrong date, wrong date, wrong. Yeah.
My all-time favorite is reconciling expenses and discovered that I booked prepaid rentals twice at two different rental agencies for the same trip. So you do have to pay attention to that stuff. TripIt is a app, and that's, I know, Jeff Wilson, you use TripIt as well.
I do. I love it.
And it's a great way to coordinate all of that stuff because you can automatically dump all your reservations into it and avoid doing anything more than once. So, you know, definitely stuff like that. On the rental cars, though, and what I was getting to, if you're going to a mountaintop transmitter site, probably best if you don't rent that shiny Chevy Camaro they've got sitting in the parking lot, or the bright green Dodge Challenger I had down between Memphis and Nashville not long ago. Here to tell you, going across US 71, I think it was, that thing, oh, 70, but it moved, that car did. It was fun, but not great for a mountaintop site. So by all means, when you book your rental, or even, and we'll cover that in a bit, hotel stuff, if there's anything special you need, like 4-wheel drive, HD radio, whatever, and shout out to Triple M in Wisconsin on this one. That's just who I happened to be listening to when I had a HD receiver in a rental car. But anyway, so make sure you specify that at reservation time, and again when you get to the counter, because I'm here to tell you what's on the reservation doesn't always hit their radar at all.
So one other tip along those lines, they're not always going to know what HD radio is. In fact, most of them don't know what HD radio is. They think you're talking about satellite radio. So make sure that, I mean, if it's okay to go out there, check out the car. If it doesn't have it, you know, Usually the newer, like the newer GMs will have it, maybe the Toyotas. I mean, it's getting more and more common. So more often than not, when I rent one, unless it's just a total bottom, bottom of the barrel basic Joe Basic car, more often than not now that it has it rather than doesn't. But
Right.
yeah.
And Mark Voris makes a good point. He's found some rental companies won't rent a 4x4 to you if they know you'll be taking it off road. So my typical around that is, I mean, most transmitter sites have a road. It's sort of a road. It's designed to provide access, so it fits the definition. But I usually just tell them, look, I'm going to a transmitter site. There is a road there, but it's a dirt road and it does have some bumps and I'm going to require a little ground clearance. You're best off if you can, to be honest, because the insurance could come back to bite you on that one if you take out their insurance. Your insurance could come back to bite you too. So that's one other thing with us at Nautel, for example, our corporate credit card covers most of our insurance on rental cars. If you're booking a rental car and using your own insurance, you need to make sure that you actually have rental car coverage on your insurance policy. And that's something that people have been stung by before too. So whether you're booking for home, for pleasure, whatever, it is specific coverage that's very useful. Ray Lewis made a good point here talking about the pre-entry. TSA global entry is about the same point, much better if you travel internationally. So that's really good information there, Ray, and that is good. And he does mention there's a background check. So Mr. Wilson, I don't know, your past might come back to haunt you there. That's a joke. I have no idea what Mr. Wilson's past is like, but probably much more stellar than mine.
I can make it into Canada, no problem.
There you go. So I'm going to say, if you can get in here, you can probably pass any background check. One other thing to think about is language. Depending on where you're going, language can sometimes be an issue, and you may or may not need support. I mean, I spent 17 years traveling all over the world, and the most entertaining trip that I had probably was flying into Mexico for what was supposed to be a 2-day series of installs and coming home a month and a half later by way of Argentina because everything kept getting added on and changed. Well, on the Mexican trip, they decided after I arrived, oh, we're going to take you on a 2-week tour and you can teach a training course to all of our engineers. And this was fine. It was wonderful. Mexico is a beautiful country, except my interpreter got sick on the second day. And by the time I got home, my Spanglish was really, really good. It had improved remarkably. I mean, I'm not conversationally bilingual, but it's amazing how fast you learn when you don't have any other alternatives. So definitely in that. And I know, Shane, you do a little bit, not overseas so much, but into some of the more low regional areas. So you probably, I assume, have a little bit to deal with there.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. When I was working with another company, actually, I had taken a trip to India. And that by far was probably one of the most entertaining in terms of language and cultural barriers. We actually weren't supposed to be working. It was a government holiday, but my host insisted that we continue working, and I was just terrified we were going to get tossed into jail or something. But anyway.
Yep, and I mean, I've run into that where depending on where you're going, you definitely need to be aware of just sort of, what the local customs and holidays may be. And that is a really good point, because I've run into that situation where you'll make arrangements to fly into somewhere and discover that you've flown into an area where you really shouldn't be for the next couple of days. Rich Hahn makes a good point. Instead of telling them you're going to a transmitter site and need some ground clearance, how about the radio station I'm going to has a so-so road and I need a little clearance? And Elaine Jones says she has a good story about flying into Narita Airport in Japan and hitting a language barrier. Elaine, you brought it up, so I hope you got a microphone with you. I'm about to unmute you if I can find you on the list. And you're not panicking and saying don't do that. So there you go.
Okay, I'm
tell us
unmuted. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, this was quite a while ago when I was working in international sales. I flew into Tokyo, and of course, big airport, and you take a train to get into town. And I was able to read where the train was, and I was able to get into town, and I saw the words Tokyo Station on the side of a building, and those were the last English words I saw anywhere. And I had written down the name of the company that I needed to visit and their address, but of course I had written it down in English. And I go outside and find the taxi stand, and I hand a taxi driver the card, and he shakes his head, can't read this. I give it to another taxi driver, shakes his head, can't read this. So I wander back into the station in dismay, and I finally found a little concierge place, and I asked them, I said, anybody here speak English? And they said yes, and they took my little card, rewrote it in Japanese. I went outside and immediately got in a cab and went to where I needed to be, but I was sweating for a while.
Yep, and I've had a very similar situation in a couple of countries where so after that happened, I think twice, I learned really quickly to arrange to have one of the local folks pick me up at the airport.
I will say I did discover recently that Google Translate actually is a really great tool in a pinch, and it's gotten better and better. I mean, it's you may still end up not exactly translating some local idioms or dialect or things like that, but I mean, you get the gist of it. You can point it at a particular sign or an image, and it'll show you what it says.
Right. What was that, Elaine? Sorry.
I should mention my trip was pre-internet, so I was really stuck.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I mean, even in the old days of anybody remember Babelfish, it used to be really awesome to take something, translate it from English into another language to another language to another language and play the circle and see what you ended up with. So, Elaine, thanks very much for that story. I appreciate that. One of the other things, so we've finally arranged to get where we're going. We got to got our lift on the other end, and we get to our hotel. And this may or may not come as a surprise to some of you, but I drink a lot of coffee. I drink several cups of coffee a day, but only on days ending in Y. And we do an annual pilgrimage to this little town called Las Vegas. Oh, look, I'm not the only one. And Las Vegas has a lot of these shiny, noisy, smoke-filled places called casinos, and their goal is to have you down on the casino floor spending money and not up in your hotel room drinking coffee. So finding a place with a coffee maker can be a challenge. My answer to that is a quick trip to Walmart and build a coffee bar in my hotel if I'm there for more than 2 days. But so Jeff, what do you do to make sure that the coffee is on site when you arrive?
Well, that's the first thing. So you mentioned Vegas, and yeah, the first trip is either to Walmart or Target to get a $17.99 Mr. Coffee and some decent grounds, and in the long run, it ends up being hundreds of dollars cheaper than buying the $12 coffee at the base of the casino hotel. So that is what I do.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Shane.
I was going to say my wife actually tipped me off to that as well. She knows how much I like to drink coffee. So she would oftentimes, send me with one of those little, when I would drive around a lot, I actually would bring a coffee maker with me. And, I'd keep a tiny little Keurig and some K-cups in the truck because you never know what you were going to run into. And well, then you got fresh coffee at the transmitter site too. Hey, win-win.
Right. And Aaron Reed mentions that until recently, Las Vegas was the westernmost place you could go to Dunkin' Donuts. And I'll add a side note into that, because if you're doing the in-room coffee bar that you went to Target or Walmart and bought, you can buy Dunkin' Donuts coffee grounds at the Target or Walmart as well. So again, win-win. Marcus O'Rourke brings a good point. He always tries to stay at a Hampton Inn, free breakfast, usually coffee at the front desk 24/7 plus the in-room. And this comes back to what we were saying with the airlines, or what I was saying is pick one, stick with it, and get the status.
So, and back, I noticed that Rich Hahn mentioned AeroPress, and I will say that that is what I take when I go camping. So you can actually have your own French press, which I might have to start doing that when we go to Vegas. Instead of going out to buy one, I'll just take the camping gear, and then you just need to figure out a way to get hot water.
There you go. Elaine brings up a good one. There's a great 1-cup coffee maker called My Joe that's manual and uses Keurig pods. All you need is hot water and you press your coffee yourself. So sort of a French press Keurig machine. It's kind of a cool idea. And that is a really good point. So, I mean, the one thing for me and the Hampton Inns that Marcus mentioned brought it to my attention because I'm a Hilton Diamond member. Specifically for that, and they give you the 2 free or the 2 premium parking spots, but I usually park at the back just because at the point I get to the hotel, I need to go for a walk. And John Van Milligan is making a dig at Rich Hahn needing his coffee. So Rich, if you're still here, feel free to shoot back on that one. But yeah, the other thing that you find, and so technology can be a little intriguing in different places. How many times have you been to a hotel and tried to hook up to the internet? Whether it's in English or some other language, sometimes it can be a challenge. Shane, you're nodding, so I'm guessing you've seen this before.
Oh, absolutely. And there's nothing worse than really bad hotel internet.
Okay,
In fact,
there's one thing worse than bad hotel internet.
Oh, yes, the toilet, yeah.
So I ran into one. Thank you. I ran into one in the Middle East once where anybody who's been RVing or is familiar with RVs is familiar with the term wet bath, where the shower is in the bathroom, the drain is in the floor, the toilet is in the middle of all of that. And this hotel we hit in, I think I was in Iran at the time, was literally a wet bath. The shower was over a hole in the floor, which doubled as the facilities. So definitely the technology can be some interesting challenges at various times. And Mark Voris mentions again, the hotel chain membership, and with him, he's a Wyndham member, so there's a Stupid 8 or Super 8 in nearby.
Well, one of the nice things about technology too is, so as a Hilton's probably my first choice, and you can stay from Hampton Inn all the way up through DoubleTrees or wherever. But with the Hilton Honors app, in 99% of their locations, and I think Marriott has the same thing, you can get your key before you ever check in. So there's times, especially if you're coming in late, it's 2 a.m., for whatever reason, you don't even want to go to the front desk. You can have your room chosen, you'll get your key, you walk up, hit the button on your phone, and boom, your door unlocks. You don't even have to see anybody. Great for these COVID times as well.
Yep, absolutely.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, that's one of the things, like my cell phone, I'll try to get it to the camera. I've got a travel app folder with all of the hotels that I use and everything. So Mark mentions he carries a TP-Link hotspot. I've got to maximize the question because you guys are sending stuff so fast I can barely keep up. TP-Link hotspot, so if Wi-Fi is not so good and there is an Ethernet jack, you can create your own. Aaron Reed brings up a really good one for the US-based ones. For those in the nonprofit realm, Mobile Beacon, available through TechSoup, has battery 4G LTE Wi-Fi hotspots for $15 one-time fee and $120 a year for service from Sprint. So that's now, Aaron, is there any kind of data limit on that? If you want to, actually, I tell you what, Aaron, if you've got a microphone, I'm more than happy to open it up and let you address that a little bit. I've got you unmuted on this end. And if you don't have a microphone, then feel free to type it. I'll give you a second or two to unmute and tell us what you think.
Okay, can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Yes. And based less than 10 miles from me in Johnston, Rhode Island, just outside Providence.
So yes, this is a commercial plug. I thought you weren't supposed to do a call to action.
Actually, I believe they are run by a religious TV organization as a separate, what do you call it, subsidiary I guess, but it's available to all nonprofits. We've been using them for a couple of years now at Rhode Island Public Radio, and I've never had any sort of, proselytizing or anything like that. So I just take advantage of a great deal. To answer your question, it is through Sprint, so your mileage may vary. There are limits because they come from Sprint, not from Mobile Beacon. Basically, as I recall, you're limited to 20 gigs a month, after which they may elect to throttle you. And I've had a lot of discussions about that, and with Mobile Beacon, and they basically say that it's kind of a roll the dice. It depends entirely on how much you're using it and also your pattern of usage. If you're just plowing through 20 gigs all at once in one big thing where you're just like running like an STL off it for weeks on end, they will throttle you almost immediately. If you happen to go a little bit over because it's added up over the month, they probably won't throttle you very much. It's all about trying to protect the whole network from you, as it were.
I mean, having said that, I probably, because of some of the sites I go to, I end up using my cell phone for Wi-Fi on occasion. And, so I tend to be the heaviest data user in our company, and it's rare for me to hit more than a gig a month. Yeah, you wouldn't want to stream. You're not going to watch Netflix on it. But for regular use, 20 gig a month would be way more than enough.
Aaron,
Luckily, Wendell doesn't know the difference between the Jeff W's. So
So little Jeff gets, and I should say that he gets little Jeff, I get big Jeff, just because I'm a little taller and a little older and maybe a little bulkier. And
I was not going to say that.
so,
Aaron, have you seen any impact since the T-Mobile acquisition of Sprint?
I have not, although it's funny you mention that, because we are just about to place, if things go the way we expect they will over the next 2 weeks, we'll be placing an order for 6 more of these hotspots. And I am intrigued to see what's going to happen with that as well, because historically their deal has been through Sprint. And whether or not that's really going to keep flying under T-Mobile or what is sort of an open question.
So that's a really interesting thing. And Aaron, thanks very much for coming in and sharing that with us. So I'm going to scroll right back up. Actually, you can just tell me. So what was the company name so folks can search for it?
It's Mobile Beacon. If you go to mobilebeacon.org, that's the company name. If you want to actually purchase the hotspots and the service, you have to do it through TechSoup. So you have to be a registered nonprofit in order to get a TechSoup login.
Cool.
In the U.S.
No, very good. So that's for our non-com customers. That's a really good tip. Thanks very much for that, Aaron.
You're welcome.
All right, so we're on the road. We've got our hotel. We've been running. We've gone, depending on where you are, several hours in an airplane and a whole lot of travel. We've got to sometimes take a little time for some self-care. And whether that's, sorry, Shane, couldn't resist. Whether
The
that's
joys of social media.
reading your favorite IT book or just distracting yourself with Snapchat. It's important. So Shane, I know that you made the mistake of posting that on Facebook once, and of course everything that goes on Facebook ends up in my file folder.
Fair game.
But there are a lot of things like Mr. Wilson. I know that you do a lot of. I've followed you around some jaunty treks around the neighborhood, so to speak. You do a lot of power walking and jogging. Is that accurate?
I do especially if a long flight, if I get there and I don't have appointments or meetings, one of the first things I like to do is just to go out and get a little exercise, walk for a few miles or something like that, and then try to make it a habit of getting up early enough to do exactly that in the morning. And I think that goes a long way to help keeping me alert and not necessarily completely healthy, because we had a big meal the night before and there might have been some libations and everything. So, but it's always good to get a couple miles a day in my opinion. So.
Yeah. And Shane, is there anything special you do to sort of wind down? Because it is way too easy to burn 18 hours a day. You work 12 plus in the hotel room, come back and do 4 hours on the laptop.
It is. And you know what? It's okay to just veg out now and then and just take that time to just unplug, unwind. I'll sit in the hotel room and I'll just read a good book, or I'll spend some, I maybe watch some TV, or I'll actually maybe just put away the technology for a while and just spend some time really doing nothing but just relaxing. And that's tough. It's tough to do. It's a discipline that you have to learn to be able to actually unplug. But if you're constantly connected 24/7 and don't take that time, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when you will burn out.
Yeah. And the other thing, I mean, it's been proven over and over that if you run a laptop right up till bedtime, is it the red coloring or I forget
Blue.
one.
Yeah,
Blue.
it's the blue.
Yeah, can make it harder for you to get to sleep. So I mean, my laptop goes to night mode at 10 p.m., for example, and then I try to shut it off at least half an hour before I go to bed. And for me, my big thing is reading paper books. For example, the Click Here to Kill Everybody. If you do anything with IT, this is a really, if you read this book, you'll never turn anything connected to the internet on again, ever. Um, and Ed, I'm going to get you to share. Sam Wellington has linked a good body weight exercises link into the questions. So Ed, if you can share that to the chat, that would be awesome. And thanks very much for that, Sam. That will be really useful. And I discovered as my body weight gets bigger, then I've got more ability to do this stuff too. Well, more ability to do this stuff, more need to do this. I don't know how it works. Anyway, the reason we do this is because when we're on the road, we eat. Okay, Shane, sorry, you were going to say something.
I was going to say yes, that staying healthy in a hotel, in a hotel room, and staying healthy on the road, being able to get that exercise in. I mean, sometimes hotel gyms leave a lot to be desired, and sometimes you don't really have the ability to, or really the desire to go find a local gym somewhere to do something. Jeff, the suggestion of just walking around is great. Using resistance exercises in the hotel room, like Sam mentioned, is also another great idea.
I would mention just on the walk around part, be cognizant of the neighborhood that your hotel's in.
Yes,
So,
absolutely. But
That
even just
can
taking the
be-
stairs in the hotel, that's one that I try to do quite a bit. I'll actually just take the stairs, if if the hotel doesn't have them locked down.
Well, that's it. Depending on the hotel and what floor you're on. If I'm in a La Quinta, Best Western, most Hampton Inns, anything with 3 floors or less, the stairs are almost always an option.
Yep.
So definitely do that. The other thing I do is I've got one of those little rubber resistance bands. Just looks like a rubber circle with a couple of hand grips on it. And that thing travels in my laptop bag, takes up 0 space, weighs near nothing. And you can do a lot with that. Mark Voris mentioned stay away from the fast food and good diners with home cooked meals, and that's a good point right there.
So I'll mention one other tip in terms of healthy food choices when it comes to hotels and being on the road. Go somewhere like a market or a supermarket or something and buy a few things and just keep that in your hotel room or keep that in the truck with you. There are plenty of non-perishable but healthy options that you can get. Stay away from the chips and stuff like that.
By the same token, if you're going to be somewhere more in 2 or 3 nights, consider an extended stay type hotel where you'll have a fridge and a stove and the basic utensils, and then you can do groceries. Overall, the cost tends to be a lot less, and you got a lot more control over what goes in your system. So Ed is in the background pinging me, and Disembodied Voice loves his barbecue. He's not alone, as you can see from this picture. That is a place I went to with Josh Bone in Birmingham, and I forget the name. It's not Big Bob Gibson's, but another good barbecue place in Alabama. Anyway, so Ed wants to know what everybody's favorite barbecue joint is, and that is.
well, I was going to mention maybe from my shirt you could tell where mine might be located.
Kansas City, maybe. So
Best barbecue in the world, Kansas City.
not necessarily, but we can argue that later or all day. Now, having said that, though, Oklahoma Joe's is kind of cool.
They changed the name. They changed the name
It's
to it. It's
it's
Joe's
Joe's.
Kansas City Barbecue now. So yeah.
Yeah. But see, now Aaron Reed says Kansas City barbecue being the best is fighting words. And I know Wayne Pacina's on, so he'd have a comment or two on Texas barbecue. We've eaten some of that together. Um, so my big one historically has always been Dreamland Ribs in Tuscaloosa. It's the first Dreamland barbecue place. And it's really good for the ribs, or they've expanded into a chain. The subsidiaries aren't nearly as good, but so Vegas, Ellis Island, the ribs and chicken and the little place in the microbrewery in the back of Ellis Island Casino are really good. Shane, what's your favorite?
You know, I don't think I have one. Any barbecue, honestly. I mean,
There is
I
no
don't think
bad barbecue.
there's no bad barbecue. It's kind of
All
hard
right.
it's kind of hard to find bad barbecue.
So John Coulter says Texas land and cattle. Aaron Reed, I hope you're taking notes because I know you've got family down in Texas. That one I've heard of. I've never been to. Used to be a really great place in Beaumont, Texas, called Willie Ray's, but it went away shortly after Hurricane Ike. So yeah, there's just all kinds of options. But on that note, chain restaurants, I try to avoid them if I can. But if you've got to go to one, what's your preference? If you hit a hotel where there's nothing around you but Applebee's, Olive Gardens, and TCB
So
Fridays or whatever.
yeah, so actually, for fast food, some of them actually do have some really good salads. Like the Wendy's has some really, really nice garden salads with fruit and chicken and nuts, and those have been kind of one of my go-tos.
That's a good call. Elaine Jones says Bob Evans, and no question that's one of my go-tos, especially if I want breakfast at any point in the day. Mark Voris mentions Applebee's. The one challenge with Applebee's I found, and P.F. Chang's is worse, is salt. The sodium
Yes.
content in some of those dishes is amazing. So
Portion size gets to be a challenge at some of these places too, because they'll serve you this monstrous platter, and you really could go for about a third of it.
I'm not seeing the problem with that.
Yeah,
That
pack it up,
that's
take it back for later.
That's why the take-home tray is so useful, especially if you've got a hotel. Mark says order off the kids menu, and some places will let you do that. And that is a uniquely U.S. thing. Is you go into a restaurant and you get a plate about the size of I don't know what, it's like 2 feet across, and mounted high with stuff. So with the one shown in the picture, I knew what I was getting myself into with that one when I walked in and they had something called the carnivore platter. But no, the senior menu is also reasonably sized, and more, some of us qualify for that. So back to something a little more serious. When you're traveling, one of the big challenges can be weather. You're in, and so everybody's like, you've got to listen for emergency alerts, and everybody's about the EAS system. How does the EAS system disseminate geographic data? Shane?
Oh, so the EA, I was just going to look up, actually, you talked about weather apps. I was just going to look for the one that I had here.
Oh, we're going there. But so EAS will announce weather alerts by county.
Right, by county.
Do you ever know what county you're in when you're driving?
Very rarely.
So that's one big challenge is I've made it a point now when I'm going down the highway and you see this little entering Johnson County or entering whatever county, I start to pay attention, especially if there's a cloud in the sky. But this comes back to where you were about to go with the weather apps. What is the best weather app for you?
So there's one that I use. Let's see if I can find it among my very disorganized iPhone here.
I'm partial to what the forecast.
Oh, I love what the forecast.
Oh, so do I. I mean, it's more for the entertainment value than the actual weather forecasting, but
Yeah,
that's
and then for the serious one, I use the NOAA weather app.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a free and a paid, and I think it's worth to pay the $20 a year or whatever it is. It's pretty up to date.
I'm getting a bunch of stuff floating in on the questions, so I'm going to scroll that while Shane looks for his.
So
Let's
yeah,
see, but there we go. Senior menu, here we go. Oh, Mark Voris made a good point. Local taverns usually have good food, and that is quite true. Yeah, they do. He also says that he carries a weather radio in his bag, which is a good idea.
Oh yeah.
so the one I use on my iPhone is called My Radar. I don't know if you can see
So
that or not.
the funny thing is, I was just about to highlight, and I know the focus is going to be terrible. Oh, there it is.
Yep.
But yep, I've got the same thing on the Samsung, so it's also available on Android. The great thing about my radar is the forecasting is so-so, but the radar images are bang on.
They
I
are,
mean,
and it'll actually send you alerts when there is weather moving into whatever area you happen to be in. So
yeah. And then, I mean, for Canada, I've got the Environment Canada has their own weather service. So that works really, really well, just weather.gc.ca. Aaron says, don't use AccuWeather, they're evil. If anybody here's got ties to AccuWeather, I'll apologize for that right now.
Jeff
I'm
Wilson.
trying to, yeah.
And this guy
Right.
works this guy works really well for getting the NOAA weather as well.
Yeah. And let's see, Weather Channel paid app, not necessarily a bad thing there. My radar works great with alerts too, so that's a good point. Kirk Harnack likes my radar. Mark Voris likes my radar. So I think we've got a winner with my radar. I know somebody just tuned that on to, or turned me on to that one. I want to say it was Matt Golston, who I don't think is on today, but yeah, it's just been really good for that. Kirk Harnack says weather geeks pay for radar scope, but it's not decluttered. And my radar gives you much more clarity very quickly. So Kirk, thanks very much for that. And yep, local weather nets on a ham radio. So always good. What other tips do you have? So this one, and this is actually Jeff Wilson's territory now. This was coming from Grand Island, Nebraska to Omaha. And this is what I was driving into. What you don't see is the green wall behind me, as I was basically outrunning a line of tornadoes all the way down the interstate, which was highly entertaining because there were 3 different points where they had the troopers guiding traffic through flooded sections of the interstate. That's something we don't see up here an awful lot. So it's something that kind of, first time I heard a tornado siren, I assumed we were under an air raid or something. So what Shane, you're a Western guy and you've dealt with stuff like this. So how do you cope? What do you do?
Situational awareness. You've got to, I mean, watch the forecast in the morning, but just be aware that things can change at the drop of a hat. It's especially important when you're out at a transmitter site, when you're on a tower. I mean, err on the side of caution. If you even think that bad weather might be moving in at a tower site, you want to avoid that. You probably want to get out of there if you can, as quickly and as safely as possible. I mean, that's the last place you want to be in the middle of bad weather.
Yep. Absolutely. I was in one site once when the old rotary dial, well, not rotary dial, touch tone, but that style of phone mounted on the wall launched itself across the room and buried itself in the other wall. And since then, if I hear a rumble, I'm out the door and in the car and, a long way away. I don't care how good your grounding is. Like that big antenna is just a target.
Well, and I've also been in situations where I was in the building, and of course, I mean, transmitter sites seldom have windows. No idea that something was moving in outside, and suddenly I'm hearing thunder and things happen like, oh, the light's going out. as you're in this building going, oh, okay, well, in that case, the best thing you can do is just hunker down and,
Yep, exactly. Now, Kirk Harnack has thrown in 2 other tips. Kirk, I don't know if you're where you can talk, but if you can, I've just unmuted you because you just hit me with 2 tips, NWS and Google. So can you elaborate on those?
I can, just a second here. Let me see what I can do to get rid of some mics. I still got 2 computers open. So.
Hey, Kirk, turn your radio down, would you?
Yeah, I know. I've got everything turned down that I possibly can. Now I can't even hear you anymore.
That's okay. You're
let's
good.
See. Did you need any video from me or not? Probably not.
No worries. Just tell me what you were describing there with
there's a forecast that's really helpful for precipitation for the next 12 to 15 hours. It's called the High Resolution Rapid Refresh, or the HRRR, or as we fun-loving meteorologists call it, the HRRR forecast. And it can be textual, but typically it's a graphical forecast. There are a number of different websites, and in the chat, I'll plug a couple of, I'll plug a link in when I get a chance here in a few minutes. There's another forecast that's worth looking at. It's from a website called climatereanalyzer.org, and I'll plug that into the chat in a few minutes. You can look at the HRRR precip forecast with that, and it's got a slider. You can slide it back and forth and jog between hours in the upcoming 12 or 15 hours or so and see how precip is going to affect your exact area. But it also has other models that go out a lot farther. So you can even look out 7 to 10 days out in the future. Now, that's going to be a pretty generalized forecast and not exact. In fact, some people call it voodoo land. But I'll give you a chat for that. Anyway, the website is climatereanalyzer.org, and I really like it.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that, Kirk. That's incredibly useful information. Speaking of tips, and we got a tip from a listener in Saudi Arabia, and a very good point, John, is if you are going somewhere overseas, and he mentioned that you can avoid a lot of challenges with Google. And remember that a lot of the stories that, like Elaine's story about Tokyo, almost all of my overseas stories predate the internet. So we didn't have those resources, but that is a really good point. The U.S. consulate, Canadian consulate, almost every country's government will have a page telling you about travel to other countries and the kind of things that you should pay attention to, like different customs and things that you can get in the middle of that you really need to be, better informed about. So Ed, okay, Ed's already on top of putting Kirk's links into the chat for the HRRR and the climate analyzer. So Kirk, thanks again for those. And definitely weather can be one of the challenges. But how many times have you gotten to a site where you forgot to get a little advance notification and discovered that the site resisted being visited? Now, Shane, you're nodding, so tell me.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I'll give a prime example here. One site that I was at in American Samoa, and Kirk, I know you're familiar with this site as well. You literally need a machete to access the site, even under the best of conditions, and that's assuming you can get to the site in the first place, going up the trail to it on a road that's barely big enough for a side-by-side. So yeah, site access conditions are definitely an issue to watch out for.
Yeah. And I'm going to pick on Jeff Wilson now because this is something that Elaine had mentioned, and because he's got the most vocal wardrobe of all of us at the moment. How many people have forgotten to check the weather at their destination and pack the wrong clothes?
Yep.
Ever happened, Jeff?
I have done that. I have done that. Yes, I have. Matter of fact, it was 4 or 5 years ago. My Kansas City Royals were going to play the Chicago Cubs at Wrigley Field, and at the time, they're only going to play there once every 15 years. We have to go. It was 75 degrees in Quincy, and we get up there to Chicago, and there's this weather coming through. Didn't even think to check what the weather in Chicago was going to be like, and it was barely a high of 50. The game got rained out. we scrambled. We got tickets for Sunday's game, but the high on Sunday was 45 degrees. Mind you, this is the end of May. And so we got a whole bunch of new Cubs sweatshirts and all kinds of fun stuff. So, that was a big mistake.
Yeah. So the other issue that that we're going to be dealing with here in sooner than we like to think is that 4-letter S word, snow. That was a frequent issue as I was traveling around to sites in Wyoming, Montana, and Idaho. Some of those sites get snowed in for a good 6 to 9 months out of the year, and you're best to contact your whoever your local contact is for those areas and find out what the site access conditions look like. You may need a snowcat to access that site.
Right, exactly. And that's that's a
starting
really
next
good
month.
point. Yep. And speaking of that, I mean, Jeff Wilson's introduction to Nautel was when we brought him to Halifax for training in what month was that?
Oh, I think it was December 2018 or something like that. So
Yeah.
it wasn't
And
that cold.
well, the funny thing is, so a lot of our guys are based out of Miami, and Halifax in December is just, it's not a tropical destination. Let's put it that way. Mark mentions that he discovered a week ago how interesting it was to get into one of their tower sites, get stuck in soft sand, and never made it to the tower. He thinks Shane may know about this site.
I'm pretty sure I know which one you're referring to, Mark. That one will swallow your truck whole.
And that's one of the things Aaron mentioned. He's been burned a few times by the difference in weather between New England in April versus Las Vegas in April. The run and joke around here in the stretch of March through June is we can do all 4 seasons in one day. So, I mean, I've got pictures on Facebook where it was 85 degrees one day, Fahrenheit, 30 Celsius, and snowing the next day. So, definitely you do need to schedule you pay attention to the weather and the conditions where you're going. And Aaron makes another good point, pay attention to hurricane season. So, that was Mitchell, Nebraska, Mark says, Shane.
Yep.
So, all right. So the other thing that's important while we're looking at the self-care and all this is remembering that in a lot of cases, there's still folks back home worrying about you. And you do have to try to make time to keep in touch. I know with me and my wife these days, more and more, we do it with Facebook Messenger than anything, just because, that way we don't have to worry about what time zone differences are or who's awake or who's home or what. You just send a message and they know you're alive and respond whenever it's convenient.
So
But,
along those lines, one thing that I've been carrying to sites, and a lot of the engineers I work with carry to sites, are these things called a spot tracker. And what they are, they're this little orange GPS unit with it's basically a satellite modem in it. You turn the thing on, it gets a GPS lock. You hit a button, it checks in and sends an email off and says, "Hey, I'm okay. I got to this site." Sends them the coordinates where you're at. So at least, even if you don't have cell coverage somewhere, you can at least let people know, "Hey, I got here safely."
yeah.
And
And I
along
mean,
those lines, there's also the "I need assistance" button, and then the "Send out the cavalry" button.
oh, cool. And that's a spot tracker.
It's a spot tracker. Yeah, it's
Is there a subscription service to it or is it a one-time?
it is a subscription service along with the device. Yeah.
Okay, cool. The other thing, if you are in an area where there's going to be a lot of cell phone coverage, is Google has the ability to share routes and destinations and tracking information. So yeah, that's a really good point. Mr. Wilson, what do you do to keep in touch? Just call home on a regular basis, or?
I try to make sure I call home every evening. I try to pick a time when I know the majority of the family might be around. With 2 teenagers, that makes that rather difficult to catch everybody all at once. But yeah, just try and make sure we touch in every day, cognizant of the time zone that we're in and the home time zone.
Calling home from Las Vegas at 8 a.m., which is at 8 p.m., which is midnight Halifax time, is typically not a good idea.
Not a good idea. Not a good idea.
Now, Aaron Reed has posted a link to some of the spot trackers in questions, so I know it's got that over in chat now. So definitely that is an excellent resource. And Shane, I know you'd used it once when you were shipping some stuff. I think that was on your American Samoa trip. Yeah.
Here's one of the versions. This is a little fancier one. This one actually does two-way text messaging as well as just the individual, check-ins. So
Yeah. And we'll get off the picture of my dog telling me that he wishes I was home. But the other thing to remember is when you finally gotten to the site and you've gotten your hotel. Oh, Kirk Harnack mentions a point. Their family uses Life 360 because you can use it for free to keep track of up to about 7 people in the family. So Kirk, thank you. That's a good point. Life 360 for that one.
well, and yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, go.
I was going to say, Andrea also, you can also, if you've got iPhones with your family, you can share your location on that as well using Find My Device. So my wife and I use that a lot to kind of keep in touch with each other and find out when we're actually heading back home, things like that.
Yeah. And especially once you get mobile, that's a good thing. So once you get mobile, okay, we've gotten to the site, we managed to hack our way into the site, we got the work done, and just remember before you leave, close the door and put it in remote. Folks, we've run it right up to the top of the hour and a hair past. The usual resources, this webinar, as I said, will be archived. You'll be able to find it on the resources page. Definitely check out our YouTube channel. In addition to the webinars that are also on the YouTube channel, customer service puts a lot of little how-to videos, just the routine things that we tend to get calls on. So certainly check that out. I think we're probably due for a Nautel Waves newsletter soon, but Fiona hasn't yelled at me. So Ed, when you got a moment, just ask Fiona if I've got to get her content for the Waves someday soon. And on that note, Shane, Jeff, I want to thank you guys very, very much for taking the time out of your day to spend with us. Everybody listening, thank you as well. But you guys, it's been a whole lot of fun. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Jeff. Good to see everybody.
On that note, folks, thank you very much. We will be doing a webinar next week. Next week's topic will be AUI and Flash. Tell your friends. We're going to have Matt Hurden on, who's the product manager for the new AUI. We'll have, I think Alex Hartman is going to get suckered into this one. Volunteering for this one. Thank you. Aaron's got Death to Flash about 8,500 times in the question window. So we're going to have a whole lot of fun with that one. By the way, we are going to start something new next week. We're going to start a little swag giveaway. So we'll use a random number generator and just scroll down the attendee list and pick somebody to get a little swag kit starting next week. So tell your friends, don't miss it. Thank you very much and have a wonderful day.